All right, so welcome everybody to the Africa Regional Session of AI plus Compassion Global Forum for 2005. My name is Lee Kironget, and I, together with Peter, who I will introduce later, will be moderating throughout today's dialogue. Quick pause, just a bit of some housekeeping. We keep our mics on mute. Use the chat to share any reflection and questions throughout the session. Then we, the moderators, either me or Peter, is going to pick them up during the Q&A and we'll present them to our panelists and keynote speakers. Final, our forum here values compassion and respect and inclusivity. Therefore, please keep the contributions focused and respectful. So I'll just jump straight into it. Sorry, it's that time of the year in Cairo where all the bugs come out to play and disturb us. Okay. So as we begin to acknowledge Africa's unique contribution to AI and compassion, and I want to speak from my own experience running community health innovations in different parts of Africa and sometimes in Asia, just to see how AI has been able to, we've been able, for example, in Ethiopia, some of projects I was involved in, were able to detect when frontline health workers were telling us they were vaccinating people and yet they were under a tree just not doing anything. They'll throw the vaccines, and therefore that helped us cut a lot of wastage in the vaccine value chain. I can mention a bit what I've seen now happening in Kenya with the rise of electronic money and therefore the rise of fraud. And I've seen M-Pesa now digging into AI and using AI to help anti-fraud detections. But also there's a lot that I've seen happening I think in Ethiopia, also in Nigeria, when it comes to Africa, showing how technology can be rooted in cultural wisdom and the human needs. Especially I've seen a lot happening in Uganda not in Uganda, in Nigeria, where they're trying to preserve certain languages, and with the help of AI, they're able to do that. I hope throughout this session, we'll hear a lot about how AI can ensure that these minority voices that are normally forgotten becomes part of shaping a compassionate global AI future. So I don't know if Gary, are you online? Gary is our keynote speaker. Gary, are you there? Our first keynote.
I am indeed.
Okay, so I'll just jump in. Gary is our first keynote speaker. Gary is the chair of future work at the Singularity University, formerly co-founder of SOCAP, the Social Capital Markets, and a dozen other impact initiatives. He is an internationally recognized expert on the future of work, future of learning, and the future of the organization. His focus is on the strategies of helping individuals, organizations, communities, and countries to thrive in digital work economy. Please join me in welcoming Gary. Gary, the floor is yours.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Gary, in case I left anything out, please jump in and fill
Oh,
that
no,
up.
no. It's too much already. So it's not about me. So no, first off, I just want to recognize everybody that has put all of their time and energy into putting together this marvelous 24-hour event. I just have to always recognize Suto-san, Jun Suto, and Chris Ewald, my spiritual brother, Kunal, and everybody else on the team that has put so much time and energy into assembling such an amazing group of speakers. And I'm looking forward to offering just a few thoughts myself, and then I think we're going to have a group discussion a little bit later on. So I'm right now, this moment, I'm in Amsterdam, normally a variety of places around the world. I was in Addis Ababa speaking in Ethiopia at a conference last year, and had a chance to really talk with a number of people involved in helping to entrepreneurs, especially helping to bring what's called the AI tsunami to the continent. And but I wanted to maybe back up at first and offer some thoughts that I hope will be useful as we think about just what this unique moment in history is, and then on the continent, to be able to sort of shape our thinking and our approach, and to make sure that we're really understanding the ways in which we can use these exponential technologies, to be able to create a framework that encourages more compassion, and human-centric initiatives in the world. And I thought that one of the ways to do that was to start off by talking about truth. And again, I don't claim to have any tremendous moral authority to talk about truth, and to lay any requirements for truth for others, but instead I wanted to treat this as an opportunity to really examine what some of the fundamental ways that humans interact in the world, and especially since we're looking at the opportunities on the African continent, the questions that we might ask ourselves to make sure that we're using these technologies in the best ways to be benefiting humans. And so just wanted to ask 4 questions for anybody listening, and for as you think about your place in the world, and especially in using these technologies, and use this as a sort of jumping off points. I call these fire starters, hopefully to spark thinking. And so the first question is, why do we need truth? What is it about humans that guides us, that seems to compel us to require truth in our lives? Next, how have we determined truth in the past? Like, what do we do collectively and individually to decide what truth is? Third, and this is the question that I hear quite a bit, as a child of Silicon Valley for over 40 years, I've seen wave after wave of technology. And the question now is, in the age of AI, is it harder to figure out what truth is? And then finally, just given the framework of how we're all approaching this unique time in history, and these unique technologies, how can we reinforce truth that leads to compassion, and how might we use the technologies to be able to do that? So, so I would love in the chat line if anybody has thoughts on any of these questions. But I'd want to just maybe offer a couple of suggestions for ways to think about what's unique about our time, what's unique about the way we can approach these questions, and hopefully encourage you to be able to examine these questions again and again in your life, and to shape your own cosmology, your own approach to them. All right, so first, so why do humans need truth? What I would argue is that it's a survival skill. Each of us is born alone, and after we're born, we find out that there are other humans, and we need to interact with other humans. But there's also a world around us, and we need to understand that. We all, our histories all go back to the savannah or the forest, and there was a time where the human brain needed to develop and decide what truth was. That is, what are the things that are true in the world, so that I can predict what can happen, and I can actually have, I can thrive, I can have a beneficial life. And if I see something moving in the distance, is that my lunch or am I its lunch? The more we understand truths, the more that we have a consistent cosmology between us, we can actually survive as humans, and we can thrive. Not just to have sort of a baseline survival level, but we can each thrive individually and together. And what we do is we develop our own cosmologies individually. We find events, people, things in the world that we try to plug into our understanding of the world and the truths that we believe in. And then we do that collectively. We have often tribes, communities, religions, and they have often truths that are anchored in them. And then we have a process that we call scientific method that allows us to determine, especially in the physical world, what are things that we think are true, and to test those truths. So I think we need truth because this is just how we survive. And then we have a process of determining what that truth is, as I said, both as individuals and collectively. And it turns out that if we step back for a worldview, historically, there have been schools of thought about truth. I just came from lecturing in Greece at a marvelous archaeological site called Eleusis, where for 1,000 years Greeks used to journey in a 9-day pilgrimage to try to understand truth, and especially truth about life and death. There obviously is a tremendous tradition around philosophy and truth in the Eastern world, and especially in China. There's a tradition of determining philosophical truths in India, and then there is tremendous history of determining truths in the broad range of tribes and countries in Africa, and in the West and in the East. There's a number of processes that different cultures have gone through to determine truth. But there's a very unique approach to determining truth. For many African tribes, it's called divination, where what's happened in a lot of the Western world, especially, is we've sort of divorced ourselves from being anchored in the physical world and using the world around us to be able to continually divine what truth is. But the process of divination for many African tribes was to leverage the things that we see around us, water, the air, and mirrors, and to use them as ways to gain insights about what is true around us. So now we come into the age of AI. We're all being continually inundated by the waves of the AI tsunami. And how do we then determine some of the truths? What is the cosmology or the information that's baked into the truths in these large language models and other technologies? Well, it turns out that it's not biased towards a variety of cultures, and especially certainly not to cultures on the African continent. The large language models, the data sets on which they're trained, are relentlessly Northern Hemisphere, Western Hemisphere, male, and often white. The data sources overwhelmingly come from people from those countries and cultures, and they are broadly represented in the data sets. But Africa is not. The percentage of data that's in a lot of the popular training models and data sets, Africa is an afterthought. And so this is actually a tremendous limit on the kinds of truth that can be found through using these tools. If you ask Midjourney or a variety of the other image generating tools to generate a picture of a woman who is beautiful or a man who is handsome, it's going to be a Western model every time, unless you change the prompt. And so these biases, these human biases that are baked into these models, don't make it easy to be able to discern the truth through these models. And it's very, very important that we have a collective perception of what we need to do to change that calculation. Because the youth that are using, especially that are using these tools and are in many cases using them as alternatives to traditional school and training, they have no real awareness that so many of these tools are biased. Their data is biased, and the answers that they give are going to be biased, and that their cultures are not going to be reflected in the insights or the answers that these tools give. Right. So that's a big deliverable for us. We have to all commit to how we get more and more of the wisdom, especially that comes from the continent, into these models, so that the truths that are generated, the information that's generated, the insights, and hopefully the wisdom that we are able to discern and get from leveraging these tools, we have a capacity to expand the data, the sources, so that they are far more benevolent and incorporating the wisdom from the African continent. So my third question was, is truth harder to determine in the age of AI. And I think this is definitely perceptual. You might think that going back centuries or millennia, when the collective truths that might have come from a religion or from a cultural tradition, in many cases, when we were young, we outsourced that to a priest or to somebody else that we felt had the power and the insights, to a shaman or others. And so that might have been a time where discerning our own truths were more difficult because we had these cosmologies that we had strong impetus, strong influence, cultural and societal and community influence to adopt. And now we've opened the aperture. We have all of access to the world's information on what I call our digital distraction devices. And especially with these large language models, a lot of that information is now fed in to these processes where we gather information. And the challenge, of course, is that when we pair it with social media, is that the line between truth and non-truth can blur. And we can be overwhelmed, significantly overwhelmed by the perceptions of others. So in some cases, the algorithms are appearing to be humans, but they're not. On the internet, nobody knows that you're a dog, and with AI models, nobody knows that you're not a set of algorithms. And then humans are using them to basically shield themselves from a lot of the need for self-truth. We can hide identity, we can hide what we really believe, and we can leverage social media to sort of overwhelm other people's perceptions of what truth might be. And because the technologies have so little friction around them, because these digital distraction devices give us access to the world's information on a 24-hour basis, the human senses are flooded. The zone is flooded. And so what we get is so much information that it can be very hard to discern the truth because more and more information just keeps coming at us. And it often sounds very persuasive, or because the world is so complicated and others are offering us truths to be able to, or what they believe to be truths, or what they want us to believe are truths, to try to knit all of those disparate events together and somehow show that they're connected. We tend to retreat into our own echo chambers. We tend to retreat to the information that we believe already. And then we accept new information, even if it's not logical or challenges what we might otherwise believe to be true because it's comforting to us. There's a wonderful expert on the human brain, Dr. Evian Gordon, a great friend of mine, and I asked him to synthesize all of the 1 billion data points in the largest brain database in the world that he created. And he says it's very easy to understand how what we look for as humans, and especially when we look for truth, is we retreat to safety first. If we get flooded, we get overwhelmed by the information that's coming at us, or what we see in the social media sphere, we retreat to safety. And often safety is the truth that we already believe. And so this is an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity for us to try to open up the aperture and instead look for ways that we can better understand others and not just retreat to our own beliefs, but to really understand the truth that others have and how we might all be able to collaborate on building shared truths. So here's one way to think about that. I think that's an opportunity for us to all reinforce truths, processes for determining truth that can lead to compassion. So I have truths that I believe, and you have truths that you believe. But then, especially as we're growing and changing and developing as humans, that could be fairly fluid. We might develop new truths or new insights. And what I hope is true is that for many of us, there's a set of shared truths, our truths, truths that both of us believe. And then there are things that we don't necessarily both believe. All right. So what is the opportunity here is to see what we don't agree on as an opportunity to better understand. And it's only when those truths that others hold that impact your life, that have a process of othering you, that is where we need to all leverage AI for compassion. We need to use these tools to be able to better understand why it is that others have developed their cosmologies, and then where a cosmology or a set of beliefs, a set of understandings of truth impact ours, take away our power, take away our opportunity. That is where we need to have the dialogue. That's where we need to leverage technologies, not just AI technologies, but to be able to continually communicate with each other, where we can not only understand why it is that we believe certain truths, but how it is that we can adopt more shared truths in a world of continuous exponential change. So I'm going to stop there. I think that's the end of my time, but I'm looking forward to discussing some of these ideas when we get together with the group discussion.
Thank you very much, Gary, for those thought-provoking ideas. I'll just look at the chat. Just if anyone. Oh, yeah. Oh, I have asked a question. So, Gary, maybe I'll try and rephrase this a bit. This is informed from, I think, my time during the Ebola crisis in West Africa, where we knew what the truth was about Ebola. I think we thought we knew. And we went let's say about the first 3 weeks, we really did not know how to communicate our truth. So when we had the CDC professors come on radio and tell the citizens, this is what Ebola is, this is what Ebola can do to you, this is how to prevent Ebola, we realized it didn't have any impact. And this came a bit late to us to understand that there are certain communities that only believe that the truth is true if it came from a certain institution. And we were not that institution. So in an era of AI where information spreads quickly, what role should those African institutions, maybe it's religious leaders, community health workers, the teacher, play in anchoring truth among the AI technologies?
So just very briefly, because I want to make sure we're hearing from the other speakers as well. So, so first, if we could wave a magic wand, and every single human on the planet, when we were little humans, could be exposed to the idea and the process of critical thinking, we would have a foundation, a layer on which a lot of our processing of the information that we hear would be filtered. And especially when the world is so complicated, so much more complicated than certainly when I was young. When we hear new information, or when we hear something that has a direct impact on our lives, if we have critical thinking and we look for information sources that don't just reinforce what we believe, but that we believe have built credibility and trust, we're all in a much better position. The challenge is that, and this is common, I think, around the world, and it's quite true in a number of African nations, is in the past we had strong belief in certain institutions, and we certainly would have believed our teachers. We should, hopefully, at least some of our teachers. I mean, we would have believed media, and now because it is so much easier to propagate information through alternative channels, what ends up happening is our understanding and our faith in believing traditional sources is eroded. So there's a couple of very quick things that I would encourage. The first is critical thinking in schools. So the more that we can teach children as young as possible just how to discern information. My son is now 29, but when he was young, we would let him watch a lot of traditional media until he was 10 or 11, so he could question the media source, and especially when there's somebody trying to. So that's the first one: is teaching critical thinking as young an age as possible. Second is find trusted sources that don't just reinforce your existing beliefs, but that you believe have a process of determining truth. and hold their feet to the fire. If somebody says something that you aren't quite certain is true, ask. You need to ask them. You need to question them strongly to determine whether or not they really are just doing what we call a media hot take, just a really quick story on something that's happening, or they actually have not just an opinion, but an informed and intelligent opinion. Third is anchoring in communities. So I do a lot of work in Brazil, for instance, and in Brazil, the government was not supportive of vaccinations during the global pandemic. But communities came together all throughout the country, and in some cities they had a 97% inoculation rate. So that's where the community says there's a threat to us. We need to come together, determine what the truths are, and then we need to help each other to be able to thrive. And so the greater the social cohesion we can have as humans, the more connected we can be, especially in our communities, the more we're not operating in isolation, which is something that unfortunately is quite easy to do in the modern era. The more we have that anchoring with our communities, the more likely we are to be able to build shared truths that can overcome the misinformation from the wave after wave of information on social media.
Thank you very much. I will see if there's one more question down there. No. Thank you very much. Very thought-provoking. And guys, if you have any other question later on, just drop it in the chat and we'll get Gary to answer them a bit later. Now we'll move to a different part of the section of today's. Thank you, Gary. With Dr. Alexis. I wonder, it's going to be a fireside chat with Dr. Alexis. Dr. Alexis is an accomplished equity and inclusion strategist, a keynote speaker, and a leadership development facilitator with over 15 years experience. She's the founder and chief strategist for Stokes Strategy and Consulting, partnering with universities, nonprofits, and corporate organizations to build policies, practices, and a culture where everyone can thrive. She previously served as the Associate Chief of Diversity and Inclusion Officer at Harvard University and Assistant Dean at the Harvard School of Engineering. Today, she's going to guide us in exploring the relationship between belonging and AI and how can technology become more culturally responsible and inclusive. Dr. Stokes, please speak a little bit on you, and then could you please start by sharing what belonging means in the context of AI?
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee, and I really am appreciative of being here, part of such a dynamic event that's bringing together so many voices, cultures, traditions, and disciplines together. And this really is central to the work that I do. It's collaboration. That's what we're doing here. And my work really does leverage the power of collaboration and data and dialogue and equity-centered practices to shift policies and systems, leadership practices in a way that increases belonging, it increases accessibility and inclusion. And as you mentioned, I worked at Harvard Engineering and did quite a bit of work in thinking about what does this concept of belonging and accessibility, inclusion, diversity mean within the context of STEM, but specifically within the context of artificial intelligence. So I appreciate your question around what does belonging mean? Because I think sometimes we often will use terminology and assume that we all mean the same thing. And so to ground us in a definition, I think is really critical here. And so for me personally, belonging really is about being seen and seeing others' humanity. It's about taking up space, whether that be in a conversation, within an institution, within a career field. One point that I'd like to make in the conversation of belonging is that we need to be intentional that the focus is not just on whether or not a person or a community feels like they belong in a certain context. The important question, the bigger question is, do I want to belong in this career field? Do I want to belong within this institution? Is that organization removing barriers and opening doors to ensure that I and others that look like me or those that have historically been denied access can thrive in that particular space and do honest and just work? And so in the context of AI as a field, as well as thinking about the design process, this question that I think about professionally with regard to belonging is, if environments and cultures and organizations are intentionally establishing structures and practices that foster a sense of belonging, then that means people will experience acceptance and integration, meaning their peers and their colleagues welcome and value them and their contribution to the AI. The competence and knowledge, which means they know what's necessary to thrive in that particular space, which means we're not gatekeeping knowledge, we're not gatekeeping opportunities. And they experience safety, the safety to express themselves, their views, their traditions, their culture in the context of AI and designing technology. And so I think we have to really explore if the current culture of AI sends that message of wanting a diversity of voices, prioritizing accessibility and global perspectives. Is this a career field that's open to cultural approaches? This interdisciplinary collaboration and conversation we're having here today and for the total 24 hours. And those that want to be a part of serving the greater good. Is AI ready for that? Is it sending the message that that is, in fact, what those in the field would like to do? Oh, you're muted.
Dr. Lee, you are muted. Yeah.
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
So sorry, I thought that was a very nice segue, not the muted part, to what I would like. It would be probably a follow-up question. So in many indigenous communities, and more so also in Africa, there are communities already practice inclusion through their traditions of, say, Ubuntu in the Southern Africa, among the Bantu, and the Harambee around in East Africa, and etc. in other communities. How might these principles shape a sense of belonging in AI design? And how do we then, as a follow-up to that, ensure that these principles, these socio-cultural practices of belonging is not completely lost, and how do we channel them into AI design?
Yes, this is a great question. And within the context of the conversation of AI and compassion, these are principles that should be grounding us. There is so much for us to learn from the indigenous communities and so many African countries that are guided by these principles. I am because we are speaks to the reimagining of AI design, the process in a way that sees the humanity and interconnectedness of us all. It centers having communal responsibility and collective well-being at the heart of the process. Harambee places the group before the individual. There's so much to learn and could completely reshape how we think about not just the design of technology, not just how we are recruiting individuals into the field and into the design process, but to the implementation and launch of the technology. And that, again, we're centering humanity and recognizing that without each other, we're not able to thrive. And centering these types of traditional principles leads to a strong sense of belonging at the research level. It increases trust at the implementation level. There's a great deal of skepticism when it comes to technology, especially AI. And this is just disproportionately present in marginalized communities because history has proven that we become the test subject of technology with no regard to the immediate or long-term harm that it can cause. And so for you to bring up these principles, I think is critical when we talk about how do we infuse AI with compassion and honoring humanity, because these are principles that indigenous communities in African countries have been using for long before any of us were here. And I think that's going to be crucial to really redesigning the AI design and research process and even the implementation process. Are you muted?
I'm not AI. So you kind of alluded to something that you mentioned about the design phase and the implementation phase. And this kind of sparked a thought I had I was advising a biometrics company, a health biometrics company in the UK on scaling out the production and reaching out to communities outside the UK. And one of the things we found out was by the time we went to test our technology on our clients, which were mostly in the global south, we found out it was already too late. We didn't involve them early enough. So we didn't check for callous fingerprints. We didn't check for certain things that we should have checked for. So in AI, if we borrow from that mistake we made as hardcore hardware takers, how do we ensure that we create these ecosystems so that these pockets of social cultural knowledges, Harambee, Ubuntu, is not lost? Because my grandfather in Maasai land will not join the AI race, but how do we build that ecosystem so his knowledge, her knowledge is not lost?
Yes, so I think this goes back to something I alluded to in that first question, which is we don't gatekeep. We don't gatekeep the opportunity to have access to the design table. We don't gatekeep the knowledge of this. You know, those traditional practices that you mentioned and philosophies and frameworks, they give rise to the question for me when it comes to AI is what are we hoping to achieve here? What's the impact that we're hoping to have via AI? And how does that relate to our humanity? How does that relate to our ability to thrive and thinking about it through this global lens, through this communal lens, to say not just one community thrives, but we actually all are able to. And I think some of the strategies we need to think about is, of course, who makes up the design team? How intentionally are we being in having diversity at that design table? But also recognizing that this is not going to be a one-step process. This is not going to be a 1 month, 1 year process. This is long-term. So we're thinking about what does K-12 education look like? And how are we incorporating AI knowledge there that is culturally sound and responsible? And infusing ethics and really encouraging students. I think the speaker before me talked about thinking critically, and that being a part of education is to help us think critically. How are we doing that at every stage of education for students so that, one, we are nurturing that interest in entering and that sense of belonging of I do belong within the field of AI. And we are educating individuals to go into this field with ethics, with this communal value at the heart of it. Because right now we're trying to infuse it in a lot of cases where someone may have been in the field now for years, and this is the first time they're really, being forced to think about the impact that it has on communities and on humans. In addition to, I want to say it's what we're doing today. how are we inviting the philosophers, the anthropologists, the sociologists, the community activists, the faith leaders, et cetera, into the design room and being at the table throughout the entire process? That's the beauty of this particular event, is interdisciplinary. It recognizes that for us to be successful, we need all of our various experiences, expertise, cultures, practices at the table. The fact that we are doing this across the world and bringing in these perspectives and these practices from so many different cultures is how we're able to then build technology that recognizes the humanity of everyone. And I think these African principles that you're referencing are an example of how countries in the global South have been doing this for so long, and we have so much to learn.
Thank you very much. Just another quick one on that. I was just thinking about the risk of not including AI in the risk of not including belonging in the design of AI. And if you have any life examples, probably from your time in Harvard in education or in languages, what do we risk when we don't ensure that belonging is at the core of AI design?
I think one of the things that I've heard quite a bit throughout the talks today is around biased technology. In addition to a lack of accessibility, whether the technology itself is not accessible or the field of AI is not accessible. Again, going back to that concept of gatekeeping. If we're not centering this concept of belonging, do people really see themselves in the design technology? Do they see their culture in the implementation process? Are we going into communities to launch a technology and have never taken into consideration that community, heard their voices, and recognize the value of their contribution? That's what's going to lead to a more inclusive and humane design process, and ultimately the technology that we create.
Do I hear you say design with the end user in mind?
Yes, with the end user in mind. And you asked about examples. There are examples in healthcare, there are examples in the criminal justice system. We think about facial recognition technology that has resulted in wrongful arrest. Because again, algorithms have to be trained. And if it is underrepresented with it, as far as certain cultures, communities being represented in that data, if they are not represented in the data that's training the algorithm, if the data that's training the algorithm is biased, it's going to give you biased results. And these have real world acts that are affecting communities. They're affecting communities on the continent. They're affecting multiple racial and ethnic groups and genders, et cetera. And so we really have to think about the end user when we are designing this technology.
Thank you very much. I just want to pose and say to anyone else listening in, please, if you have a question, just drop a line in the chat and we'll get to you. Doc, now I have two more questions I want you to guide us on as we come towards the end of this session. If you could really briefly advise the next generation of AI leaders, and especially young African AI leaders, what one practice would you emphasize to keep belonging at the center of their work?
I think one is going back to those traditions that you mentioned, keeping those as central to the work. When I'm working with clients, one of the things that I always do is I start with grounding in the values and what's the goal here. And putting those up, if we're in person, I'm putting them up on the wall and I'm saying, these are saying, because we need to constantly be reminded of the goals we've established, the values that are grounding us. And if those values are about humanity, those values are about diversity and inclusion and accessibility and belonging, that gives us something to continuously reference back to. We've all agreed to these are the grounding values and the principles we're operating on throughout this design process, and incorporating check-ins throughout the way. How have we honored these values and these principles? And if we're not able to identify clear ways that we've honored belonging, we've honored Harambee, we've honored these various principles, then that means we need to take a step back. And I think the same way that we center the value of innovation and we center the value of these various things, we have to do the same when it comes to belonging. I think that would be the first thing that I would say is starting the design process, ground yourselves in those values. Don't step away from them. They're culturally important and they are irrelevant and important to the field and to the design process. And part of belonging is to send that message to all communities to say these traditions that ground your culture bring value to the design room. And so my hope is that leaders within the continent that are leading the way in this space of AI know that the very practices and traditions that they've grown up honoring deserve to be in the design room.
Thank you very much. Just another thing that I thought as you were talking, it's very, and maybe this would be a nice way to wrap up our session, is I was thinking, while we can really genuinely focus on the region, but also we live in a global world. And I saw a study a few weeks ago, was it a month ago, that the global trust of AI is only at 50% right now. So how do you see belonging in AI intersecting with that global trust in technology?
Yes, I go back to that definition I was mentioning at the beginning around really belonging is grounded in the acceptance and the integration. So that means my contribution, I am valued within the space. And so I think part of the reason we're seeing that 50% is that there are so many within the world that don't see themselves reflected. They don't see how their culture, how their experience, how their background was valued or is being valued within AI. They don't see it as being accessible to it as well. I think that, and I think also history plays a role in how have communities been subjected to the harm of technology. I also think there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. And so I think there's not one answer to this. I think it's a very nuanced and complex answer. And again, requires that interdisciplinary approach, I think, for us to think about how do we build that trust, but belonging is going to be key to that. People have to really see themselves within this and know that they are valued for them to really start to have trust. How are we being transparent about who was at the design table? Was there diversity within the design team? In addition to the practices of implementing the technology, are they culturally responsible? And I think that will help to build trust.
Is in your opinion, is trust intertwined with stickiness and continued use of technology as it's in other, let's say, if the cell phone is not, you feel there's something wrong. If you don't trust a vaccine, for example, as you've been told before, then do you feel the same would be with AI? Because if you don't trust it, would that mean you'd be less likely to be a habitual user of that specific technology?
Absolutely, you're less likely to use it. So if you think about if there's technology within healthcare that could be beneficial to someone, but they don't have trust and they're saying no to that has long-term effects for not just that person, their whole family. And so I think we are seeing that if people don't trust, I mean, look at education. We're seeing that there's a decrease in trust in education, in science, even people are questioning, right? And so we have to understand, what does this role of trust building and belonging and community building and all of that play into this as well? And it has to be incorporated into the conversation, because to your point, if someone doesn't trust something, they're less likely to use it. In addition to, in some cases, you mentioned the phone, many now are starting to feel like I'm being forced, right? Everything is so connected to this device that now it's being pushed upon me. And I don't necessarily think that's the right approach to push it upon people. I think it's more we're welcoming people in to the process again to learn the knowledge and things around it. The more you learn about something, that trust is going to increase. So again, how are we really not gatekeeping the knowledge as well?
You mentioned phones, and something came to mind. I read this somewhere that phones are our new babies. The only difference, we don't leave our phones at home with strangers when we go to work. So, um, just just uh, um, just to kind of wrap up, and I want to finish up with something that happened to me about a week ago, and I think I mentioned this to you. I dropped by Kenya, and I was in a very small village out with the Maasai, and I met this old lady, and I gave her a lift. And I was trying to make small talk with her, and it was extremely hot day. And I told her, "Hey, it's really hot. What will the cows eat?" And she just smiled and told me, "Oh, don't worry. We saw the hyenas pass yesterday, so it's going to rain soon." And true to that, well, before I got to the gate, it was raining. And the weather forecast had predicted it was going to rain. It was not going to rain for another 4 days. But she was like, "Yeah, the hyenas passed." And we know when that happens, it rains. So it'll be interesting to dig a bit deeper and see what other hidden gems of I think historical knowledge of the environment and the movement of animals and all that. I know rats have been used to detect earthquakes and such stuff, and in different cultures. So I think this really ties in very well with that. So thank you very much for a very nice chat. I
Thank you.
wonder if anyone has a question. No, no question yet. All
So
right. Thank
one
you
question.
very much. One question
Oh, I
there.
think we have
Yes.
one.
Hi. So when you said like belonging is being seen, right? So one bigger problem when we talk about building responsibility by the producers, but the consumer part, there is a lack of accessibility for a huge set of people there, right? And what is in Africa that is right now happening to bring more people, that is AI literacy, or having more into accessing these type of technologies? Is there any initiatives or movements that is happening there?
Yes, and I think I heard you correctly. I was having a little bit of difficulty, but I think you were asking with regard to remote areas and
Yes.
having access.
Lack of accessibility to the AI tools, and also to the tooling efficiency. Even if you are into the technology, if you do not have the tooling efficiency to use AI better, that is the years of experience and those type of things doesn't matter right now. As of now, that is how the world is evolving. So that difference, is there any activities that you are planning or something actionable that you suggest?
Yeah, so I think this is a great question, because I think this is a problem that's present in multiple contexts. And so I think this is where partnership comes into play. And I think those that do have access to those resources have a responsibility to partner with those in remote areas that may not have access, to increase their access, right? To bring them in, to meet them where they are. And thinking about the long-term plan that we can of how do we ensure that they have sustainable access to that. But I think thinking about this interconnectedness component and humanity also means that those of us that do have greater resources and have greater power or privilege, we have to recognize that and say, how are we using that for the greater good for us all to be able to move forward and progress? I think is going to be a critical question.
Okay, so that means the collaboration, that is human infrastructure, is to be created across from those who have accessible towards that or the efficiency to pass it on to the next layer people, hand holding, right?
Absolutely. And even institutions, right? Whether we're talking about educational institutions, we're talking about corporate organizations, we're talking about investors, for startups and things like that, how are we ensuring that those that historically have not had access or been denied access, or because they're in remote areas, that we don't automatically exclude them from, whether it's the design process or having access to the technology or the resources, to your point, to fine tune that technology as well.
Can I quickly just jump on that? It's very interesting, and I've spent quite a big chunk of my life trying to deploy technology in these really hard to reach areas, and I'm glad you brought that up. And there's denial access, there's denial, of course, of devices and infrastructure, but also there's know-how. And so and maybe I hope AI and this is what I try to advise is to use frugal innovation. Think about how do you design for a hard to reach area instead of internet, use SMS-based technology or something. How do you? So and also because of the lack of infrastructure, I've seen Africa frog leap. African countries, not in all, some of them frog leap traditional curves of development. So I have a few examples that is really interesting. I think maybe if I was trying to look it up, AI-powered climate models to support small farmers with drought predictions in Kenya. And I hope now they use the intelligence of this Maasai lady. There's the smart grids integrating renewable energies. This in South Africa, I was there a few months ago, where really hard to reach areas that did not have cold chains, but now they're using smart grids to be able to integrate renewable energies with sustainable cities. And we've seen what Rwanda is doing with drone technology, Zipline, when it comes to delivering remote supplies in medical supplies in remote areas. And what is happening, I think, also in Ethiopia, where they're trying to, because Ethiopia is a home to some huge diverse fauna and flora, and they're using AI and traditional knowledge to map and name all these different species that are very new to science. So there's quite a few interesting AI technologies that are being used in these really low resource, far to reach areas. And it'd be really interesting, I think, at the end of all this, at one point, to collect all these amazing innovations that are being deployed in low resource areas. Sorry, I get too excited
No,
about that.
absolutely. And I think going back to the responsibility of those that have resources, part of it is also platforming in these types of innovations and putting a spotlight on what is happening, because sometimes biases lead to people assuming that nothing is happening within these lower resource areas or remote areas. And so how are we doing our due diligence to highlight the amazing work that is happening?
Yeah, because towards end of this, really, what actually we are trying to do is to pick up the best practices among different regions and see that how can we apply in a global scope, because we do not have time, and then whatever best practice happening in different regions, that should be collaboratively transferred to the next region, and that is the only way that we could move faster. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful reflections. Well, thank you, Dr. Stokes, for guiding us through this session. We will now move to, actually, just before we move, I think the concept of belonging is something I really hadn't even thought about it in depth. And when you framed it, that belonging really creates trust and should be core of every design, it really resonated with me, because it's something I think I've always not thought about it that way. Sorry, so we'll move to the second keynote, yes. Sophia. Sophia, are you with us? Yes, Sophia is there. She's on mute. Sophia is an MD, is a medical doctor, leading innovation and virtual client at Lucidis. Okay, I'm going to really mess up that Lucid. Okay.
No, it is well said.
Yes, that one. That's what I wanted to say. One of Portugal's largest private health groups, specializing in smart aging and precision medicine. She holds an MBA from Lisbon and earned a scholarship from MIT and Harvard Medical School. A futurist winner of Singularity University's Global Impact Challenge and Europe Private Hospitals 2023 Best Innovation Project. He serves as a medical officer at Patient Innovation, advisor at Youth Untech, and teaches innovation and new technologies in health. She's going to guide us today into a very interesting topic, from One Health to Compassion AI, personalization, connection, and flourishing. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lee. Now it's really good to meet you and to see you now in person, because we just shared by email. Can I share my screen?
Yes, please.
So I'm going to share the entire one. I'm going to go with these. Okay. All good? All seeing my hello upside down? Okay. Are you seeing my screen? Yes. Sorry. I cannot see you. I just hear you.
We can see your screen. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Show it upside down. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So first of all, congratulations on the organization of this amazing conference. Actually, I just came from another one, and in-person one from HIMSS, and I was sharing the link with everyone, because when I talk about it, there's always a wow effect in the audience, in the people. So it's really interesting how this comes to a moment. So I'm really glad to be part of it, and I was able also to listen some of the sessions in the morning. So very happy. This is a challenge for me, because I live literally in the middle of technology and people, or of innovation using technology and people. So it's very interesting, because AI is such a hype world, and we are often spoke about it as a super interesting tool. But I believe that it is, of course, much more than that. It's kind of a mirror to the civilization that we are building, which I think it's also a challenge to us all. Because as we are applying, we are moving on it, and of course the way we design it is for sure a reflection not just of our technical skills, where we have discussions everywhere about it, but also, and much more important, our values, our sense of purpose, for instance, or our vision for the future. And I think when we talk about the future, is always a synonym for a journey. And I think that in healthcare, where I move, health is always a journey per se as well. So this vision where technology, humanity, and nature can flourish together is probably, and I'm going to be maybe very closed on that, but probably the only way I think we can see and approach healthcare. So I thought how we can position One Health, the concept that I'm going to talk a little bit further, and this compassion AI in the same stand. So it's very interesting that I think we all agree that we are in a crossroads, with probably not just two cross, but a lot of them, where we have a low or medium low global AI trust. So when you think about it in healthcare, it's even lower than the 54%. And numbers are important just to position where we are in the picture. And I think healthcare is even more fragmented when we think all across the globe. So we have very different approaches to what it means to be healthy, what it means to navigate a system, how the system treats the patient or the citizen. So and many times, allow me to do the analogy, we work and treat organs, not people. We work with technology, not vision. And this is one of the largest problems, is even the person is just part of the system, and we need to zoom out to really look at ecosystems. So I call this kind of the civilization diagnosis, where AI is not just about apps or, of course, algorithms that I really cherish, but it is much more whether our civilization chooses to go from the crossroads of efficiency over flourishing, or profit over purpose. And I think this arena, healthcare, is probably one of the best arenas to test this choice over and over again, because it touches every human being, and every community, and of course, because of that, every ecosystem. So I wanted to kind of invite everyone to think about how we can navigate this ecosystem, this world ecosystem, where compassion AI, or the way we look at AI, which I totally identify myself like that, is not just like a smarter or a smart machine, but it's a co-creating partner to improve or to see a different future. So my idea would be, of course, and I think it's something in common to everyone that would be assisting or being part of this meeting today, is a future where actually humans, technology, and ecosystems can grow and flourish stronger because they are together. And I think this compassion AI for the work I do, and for the team I lead, is much more on designing systems and ecosystems that can see all the layers of life, all the layers, not only biological, social, ecological, and even spiritual, but it in a way that we can be succeeded, and we can help us all to live longer and better together with a more meaningful approach. And this is totally aligned with the concept that I hope that everyone already heard about, but this concept of One Health. It's a concept that is coming out of the academic world. It's not super new, but we started to talk about it not that long ago as well. And it's still something that for some physicians in the world is kind of obvious. For others, it's discussable. I'm citing. And so for some healthcare systems or disease care systems, it's definitely a disruption to the modus operandi that the systems take. So One Health teaches that health is never just, of course, individual human well-being. It's totally bounded to animal health, ecosystem balance, and climate change, biodiversity, all the environmental bioma that we now start to talk about due to epigenetics, due to AI, that all of that influences health. So it's impossible to touch one part of the system and do not impact the other side. So now imagine that we have an AI tool, like a digital twin, a real digital twin, not the digital twins that we already talk about and that we already implement in some parts of health, where we have really nice sensors just connected and measuring some things, but really a digital twin of a community, integrating human biomarkers, digital biomarkers as well, livestock health, hair quality, biodiversity indexes, all of that things, of those variables that we can think that would impact that community. With this, we could imagine simulate how a new farming practice or a new policy would impact not just crops, but also respiratory disease, economic resilience, or even mental health. So this is One Health in action, and I think technology would be is actually the enabler that we were for years and years waiting to have in place. So, and this takes me to what I see, how I see health at the moment and for the next years. We are very used to talk about 4 Ps: the predictive, preventive, participatory, and personalized health. But we are now in a moment where we are adding either a 5th P or even a 6th P, which would be purpose-driven, that is totally aligned with the decision-making process in the beginning, before we take decisions on health, on our own health, or even on the ecosystem health. And also one that probably is a result of these 5 Ps together, which would be the proactive approach. So we often describe medicine of the future as based with these 5 Ps. These are not just medical principles, but they coordinate, of course, how the whole civilization actually would navigate the concept of health. And we can now bring them to life, which is probably something that was waiting for decades, because it's like some theories in physics or even AI. It was a theoretical approach. They have a theoretical approach by the 20s, by the 30s, and only now we are really seeing it in real life taking this capacity. And one of the things that we are assisting in this at this moment with these 5 Ps is the huge difficulty that all the systems, all the ecosystems have in incorporating this mindset that is totally not aligned with the design of the ecosystem. So main of the systems are disease care related or focused, and we are of course talking about exactly the opposite, to get to the citizen, to get to the human being before they got sick and before needing a system to take care of their disease. And this is, of course, a challenge. I'm going to deep dive a little bit so that we can do a relation between how we see these 5 Ps and how AI actually is boosting it. So predictivity is coming a lot from this concept of digital twinning, which I must say this is one of my sweetest topics, because I'm just waiting for computation to be able to really and properly doing it. But how we would have a digital twin of the full body with all the biochemistry, biophysics, everything fully connected, of a hospital, of the full ecosystem. So we could predict disease progression, we could anticipate ecosystems collapsing, think about the ecosystem, or think about an organ connected to all, connecting all cells. We could have this social fragility identified much before. So telling the person you need to exercise when you're 20, because when you're 50, you would need it. But not just theoretically or not just based on we think or assumptions, but to show it to everyone so that the self-conscious of each person would actually come up and change behaviors and expectations that sometimes go to the wrong place. So, but prediction without compassion can become control. And this is one of the challenges that we are living now, that many people that measure a lot of their disease or a lot of their health, they start feeling this sense of controlling. That is why ethics must be so embedded in the core, and also bioethics should be so well discussed. Then the next P, preventive, which is probably one of the oldest P's that we talk about. But when we think about preventive and AI, preventive AI could actually help us simulate alternative futures, which for someone that is always designing future alternatives would be it's a super helpful. So for example, if this community invests in clean water versus not investing, or investing in another clean energy, for instance, what would be the impact? How many people and how much of the ecosystem would be impacted? So the AI can show the health, the social, and the ecological impact in 10 years, in 20 years, or even more. Of course, we know that data is a thing, but think about that has really fully data connected with all the technology active and making the data moving around. So prevention would become something more like a civilization choice, not just a clinical advice person by person. Talking about person, of course, personalized. Personalization is where actually AI, and allow me to use one of the concepts that you so well described in your in the conference, which and probably I'm going to say it, pronounce it not in the correct way, but where AI meets Ma, the pause. So a digital twin of an individual patient, imagine, can simulate thousands of treatment path before even touch the patient. So, but the compassionate design asks which one aligns not only with survival, but also with the person life goals, with culture and dignity. We are talking about a lot about that in very hard treatments like cancer, like chemotherapy or immunotherapy. So it's always very interesting to have this stop and stare before decide. And most of the times we don't have the time to evaluate and to access these different scenarios with a high level of accuracy, and only, of course, AI would be able to do it. Then one of my favorite P's, which is participatory. So when you think about participatory AI, communities can really co-design their futures. Imagine villages, councils exploring scenarios with AI twins. Again, if we change our farming, what happens to the children's health? How can I decide to generate a law to block some usage of substances because they would impact food, health, and so on? And this is how AI could not be a dictator, but a dialogue partner. Would be how we incorporate this dialogue access to be in each of the voices. So probably the real idea of a democracy. And then the purpose driven, which I think it's the P that now connects the rest of them. So it's about embedding values as well directly into simulation. And this is probably one of the hardest but the most interesting layers of our algorithms design, which is which future do we want to prioritize, and how do we define profit growth, ecology, resilience, happiness? How do we define happiness, or even health? So by making this purpose more explicit, we are forced to choose consciously. We cannot say, I chose that because I didn't know. So as a civilization, we would be much more able. Of course, I'm talking about the good sides and the good uses, the good usage. There's always a dark side, and I think it's also important to have it always in mind. Then again, I could not connect this amazing Compassion AI playbook that you beautifully draw with the Japanese wisdom, because I've learned in a fast pace, but I directly connected to how we see this personalized precision care nowadays. So I was trying to, and allow me please, to reinterpret them through the lens of health and innovation, mainly how we do things different. And because part of the health innovation path or steps actually would be mimicked, they would mimetize exactly these three concepts. So wow, which means the harmony speaks directly to the concept of One Health, because for me it's totally impossible not to think about this integration across systems, but systems that should be balanced and coordinated in the good way. So health innovation cannot live in silos and need to be comprehensive, cross fields. Actually, cross innovation is one of the most efficient in all levels ways of implementing innovation. And compassionate AI must connect these dimensions to actually generate solutions that would fit the majority of the group. Then the space for reflection, the pause, which I found it amazing because it reminds me on how innovation in medicine often is racing ahead without pauses, because a lot of new players are entering this sector, and this is really a challenge because yet it is health. So we need to pause. Sometimes to pause too much, we cannot save a life, but most of the times this translation of pausing just help us building systems that actually allow to test, simulate, reflect before scale. And I think this is incredible, like the usage of digital twins that I already spoke about. I think they are an amazing way on boosting reflection before implementation. And then wabi sabi, and probably I'm not pronouncing it beautifully, but the beauty of imperfection, I think it resonates a lot with the reality of innovation in any field, but more when we think about human lives, which is we will never eliminate uncertainty. And uncertainty, whether it's genetic variation, pandemics, or the uncertainty of how a patient is going to receive a treatment or the way they are going to live their own health. I think this is any social determinant would be much happier if could access and embrace uncertainty. And I think that's many times we miss it with failure, and it is precisely where compassionate AI, I think, can help, which is do not deny uncertainty, just embrace it, but help us navigate it with wisdom and, of course, with resilience as far as we can. And then let me just go with an example, which is imagine that you have a city built with a digital twin, really well done. I've wrote a chapter for a book exactly around that, how we can feed it with climate projections, hospital data, traffic, cultural patterns, people that live there. And it could show two futures, one where policy prioritize efficiency and one where policy prioritize compassion. And the first is cheaper, but it's short run. And the second one is slower, more complex, but the results in resilience and healthier communities. And this is the power that I think technology would put in our hand, which is to infuse compassion and empathy in a way that not to give us one answer, but to help us choose consciously. So I kind of see this AI approach has a GPS for civilization. So a GPS that can show you the fastest routes, but also the fastest routes can be questioned if they are the best routes. And sometimes they are not, other times they are. So sometimes this bypassing parts of the route might not be the option, and we need to include that in our concept. So when we see not only AI but compassion AI has a GPS that could ask not just how fast, but at what cost and towards what purpose. I think that civilization choice would be much more resilient and real. So I'm near to conclude, but definitely design AI to focus on deepen care, not just to replace people as a whole. It's a challenge, but at the same time, it's probably the healthy usage, because actually I just came from a congress just right now where we were talking about how AI in telehealth is actually boosting this rate of substitution in one fields and other ones to improve experience. So this is kind of two or three or multiple forces pushing to different sides. So I would invite you to think on AI, not of course has it a technology, it's a lapalisse concept, but has a collective ethical simulation tool. So I think it's interesting when you can simulate, because it's like when you use virtual reality, you can deep dive on the reality and be much more conscious about the way you're taking decisions, because there's something that is, unless you have a pathology, but if not, it's something that is in all human beings, which is empathy. And I think this is something we need to embrace and to have very clear in our minds, because of course future of health personally and planetary will depend not just on what we can do, but on what we choose to do together. And I think this is again something very obvious, but in the end of the day sometimes it's not so obvious. So to give you a last message, or to share a last message, I work with AI in almost all its domains. So I work with it by designing it. I work with since, I don't know, 2010, I think. I generate algorithms, I test them, I use synthetic data, I love GANs, GANs to be understood, because actually we can do amazing things on expanding the simulation, namely in populations or contexts that we have just we are very short of data. But one of the things that I'm seeing a lot is this Dunning-Kruger feeling, that many people that touch these concepts have the feeling that this is it and this is not it. So we often think more that data will solve everything, that AI will solve everything. But compassion reminds us that it's not more data that we need, it's actually but deeper wisdom. And I think this deeper wisdom is something that we need to be proud of as a civilization, because there's a lot of wisdom on it, if not I know we have wars, we have a lot of things going on, but at the same time, we are assisting to the best examples of compassion and relationship and empathy to each other at the same time. It's kind of a balance. So I really think that the true power on AI is much more than predicting our future, is to helping us choose it. Because when we choose with conscience, we are not choosing without the responsibility, and none of us want to have a bad responsibility in that. So thank you very much. And I hope that we can do more of these type of conversations in the future, because I think they are extremely useful for everyone.
Thank you very much, Sophia. That was absolutely amazing and very interesting. I never thought of having a digital twin. And
It's a dream for me,
and
but I think only with other types of computation we can have it. Maybe quantum computing
but
will bring it.
I watched Black Mirror, so I'm not very sure.
I saw it too. Thank you so much.
Just anyone, just if there's any questions, I don't want to monopolize the questions. Please drop a question, and in the meantime, I will just probably read the question to you that I thought while you were, because I also do a lot, not as I do a lot of deployment of health solutions in very hard to reach areas, mostly the global south. And you spoke about compassionate personalization, which is normally sometimes profit driven. Where I work, most communities often lack tailored services in health or education, or mostly both. What would a truly personalized, compassionate driven AI look like?
I honestly think that we have a common. So when we take out all the layers that make us all different in terms of either education, genetics, whatever we like to say that we are super different, when we discover genetics, I think it was kind of a cold water shower saying, look, you are different from a fly on 2 or 3% of your genetics. So be conscious that you are connected literally to everything by all your molecules. So when we think about this, taking layers out, we understand that we are much more connected and similar to each other. And I think AI is being able, for instance, comparing genetics would only be possible with AI, with more or less advanced AI. But so when we have a lot of this data cleared and we can see through it with a level of objectivity, so being really clear and data driven, we see that a lot of our actions wouldn't make sense because they don't benefit the other. They just benefit some specific sorts or parts of the society or the future. So I think AI is playing an amazing role in this, making it obvious how our conscience is much more connected to each other than it is than our daily basis mindset. I don't know if I made myself clear, but it's really hard to make it in words. But it's when you take out all. There's a word in English starting by B and ending with IT. When you take all the things that are not important and you get to the main layers, we are so similar that it's not an option. It's not even a clever option not to search for the best option for everyone. The thing is really hard because we are so embedded in our fields, in healthcare, in education, in policy making, in any field, that we cannot see it. And I think this simulation world that we are using a lot, much more to gaming in a non-objective way, if we can make it more obvious to everyone, this common conscious, we could really truly change a lot of parts in the world. I really trust that.
Thank you very much.
Game of life.
Yeah. Patrick has a question. In recent AI plus compassion talk last week, we were discussing the idea of a layer of compassion over technology as a filter. Do you see a way for there to be a purpose layer Oh, nice. And how that would be, and how that would look in medicine.
I must say, Patrick, that I love the idea. I really do. And on the other hand, I think there are already some layers that we use that they approach to compassion concepts, because many times nowadays, I think we all know that we don't work with one layer of algorithms. We work with multiple layers, 18, 30, sometimes more. We adapt data. So in some of the decision making process on that, and it happens in the autonomous vehicle, for instance. This is one of the interesting cultural layers that it's discussable, is because probably in one side of the world, if the car would have to crash between two people in one side of the world, we would select to save one, and on the other side another one. So this is always a very cultural hard thing when we go to this end of line decision making process. And in healthcare, many times we are. Actually, I wasn't expecting in my lifetime to have to be part of a decision making group selecting to whom we would conceptually give a ventilator, for instance. So these type of decisions that are end of line slash life slash, no one likes to take them. So I think that probably this compassion layer would help us have a clear vision on the future and the impact. So it would take out some of the hard decisions that many times we take them because we are pushed to it and we cannot have a pause or a real evaluation on scenarios to do it. This is like the heavy part. When we go to the light part, if we go for the wellness concept, where we actually have a lot of amazing sensors and medical devices or non-medical wellness devices that measure us and give us advice on the daily basis. Imagine if besides that, we would have this compassion layer, like Patrick was saying, that empathize with you and actually understands your efforts and not just pushes you like a dictator. Had we have a lot of them like that, but would just support you on how you're feeling and how you're going through your journey. I think that would be amazing. And I also think that this is not a further future. I think this is like the challenge, and just not to make it too long, but the challenge in my point of view is when you decide to put this layer of compassion, how would you design the consequences of each of the outputs of the layer? Which is, I don't think it's so clear and obvious for everyone at the moment how to decide.
Yeah. And I was trying to get a sense of like the distinction or the difference between compassion and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So purpose more related to, to your decisions, but you talked about the medicine, so I got a sense of that. But if anything comes up, I'd be interested, in
Sorry,
what you have to
I
say.
lost the purpose on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, but it's totally true. I think, well, I think we already have some examples in happening now where purpose was the main driver, but they are all in testing. I think we're going to have more and more because with literacy going up, I'm not going to call it knowledge, but yet information distributed more and more. I think people are being more participatory in the process of co-creation for solutions or for scaling up solutions. And I think not only patients, citizens in general, and I think this is going to have a huge impact in the purpose-driven selection of solutions, because solutions were much more, the decision process was much more in the top down. So it was much more aligned with specific values like efficiency or boosting top lines or whatever. And now when you put other decision people that are engaged and are actually benefiting from a solution, the purpose driven, it changes a little bit. And I think it changed for the good.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
Now we're going to pause a little bit and reground with Patrick. Patrick is my co-moderator and he'll take over from here. Patrick is a film producer, a director, an actor, and a pitch coach. He helps accelerators, incubators, startups, and entrepreneurs pitch and fundraise. and giving them an edge. Patrick, please introduce yourself, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sophia. It's wonderful to see you. That was amazing. Appreciate it. So hello, everyone. I'm here not as an amazingly brilliant tech person in the sky. I'm here to just maybe take a moment and bring us back down to earth, to just, almost like sit in the dirt and think about things. Because I'm sure you've been listening to a lot of amazing talks. I know several of the keynote speakers, and I would be interested to hear anybody having any thoughts now about or anything that's come up for them so far this during these few hours. Just trying to get a sense of any feedback or things that you're wondering about. It'd be great to hear from the audience at this point. And then, think about that. And if you can, put them in the chat. But also, at some point in a few minutes, it would be great if those of you that are in a position to be able to turn on a camera or turn on your mic to answer like some questions, because I'm gonna lead us on a few creative exercises pretty much designed to get our attention, put our attention in different places. And I just want you to experience that. It's good for me as I'm leading that to get a little bit of feedback from you as well. So, I know sometimes, our hair is going this way and that way, and we don't want to really get on camera. I appreciate that, but maybe you could speak at a certain point. I think you could raise your hand, digitally, and then I would call on you and you could answer a question or something. And I think we're at a good size where it might be okay, Lee, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong. If somebody wants to ask something or say something, they can just unmute and say it, or should we go one at a time? Yeah, we'll give that a shot. Worst case, we have to raise hands.
Yeah.
So do we have any questions or any thoughts or any concerns? Anything that you're thinking about right now would be great.
Hi, Patrick. This is Deepak here. I'm from the organizing side of the AI+Compassion. I'm just connecting the different regions together. So I'm
great.
To help you out in any support that you need in further process in taking it towards completion. Okay.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And Sophia, I have one question to Sophia. Yeah. Okay, it is amazing that you mentioned like there is one efficiency-driven AI versus compassion-driven AI. And you talked about designing different AI systems and bringing compassion layers into that. So can you just, because this is all about taking the best practices and about a free knowledge sharing ecosystem where others can also follow. Can you just share one core design principle when you design a compassion layer in an AI? That is how will it be? Just out of curiosity, I want to know.
I don't know if I understood the question. Sorry, the last part. What? Sorry, because I was listening with cuts.
Yeah. So the question is, you mentioned about designing different algorithms for AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also bringing in compassion layer, the compassion layer in AI. So one design principles, there are different types of design principles that you use, right? Something to reveal that is how actually you are bringing compassion layer to an AI.
You want like an example that
Yes,
we already.
just one example so that people
Okay.
will be able to relate to it. So whenever who is trying to build an AI systems and all those things, they can take it as an advice from you. So that.
Sure. So one project that we launched in 2020. Sorry, I rephrased it, but because I wanted to be sure what was the question. So in 2020, in this group of hospitals, as the larger the group, the harder it is to implement things that are super new, because risk is always a thing, right? So I wanted to implement something that could improve the experience of the patients when they connect to the hospital, when they access the hospital. We all know these user stories, but this is very common, which is you have a contact center, you call, you wait 20 minutes or more, then no one picks the call, then, or no, this over and over again. So we did the basic thing, which is to put a robot on the first layer. And by the time, there was a thing about people not liking the robot. So which is normal again. So complaints reduced a lot, ironically, but each complaint has a huge impact. So every time there was a complaint, everyone was saying, exactly, it's the technology. You know, the problem is always the technology. So it was, it's even interesting, because when we think that efficiency and purpose-driven are away, it's maybe my image was not amazing because it was super efficient, but and the purpose was there, which is to turn it efficient. But then my purpose, or our purpose in the group, was to have a better experience. And the better experience is not just time, right? You need other things. So we challenged the company, and so this was 2020. In 2024, we included a new approach, which was they started to have this layer that would understand how you're feeling when you're calling. So to understand if you are in a rush, if you are annoyed, happy, what is happening. And some of the options that you can receive when you have that are different. So not because we want to handle complaints or other, but really because sometimes you're so sad that you just don't want to talk to a robot. You want to talk to someone. So we automatically put you with someone. Or sometimes it is something that is really annoying you and you're super angry and you don't want another layer. You just want to solve. So we redirect you directly with a natural AI distribution contact center. So it's even better the way we can do it like that. So it's more efficient, but the purpose, the beginning of our implementation purpose, which is to generate a better experience, I think this was a level of it. But we could put it in a non-clinical setting because, of course, the accuracy of it is still low. So we still have mistakes. We still understand people with one feeling and it's another. So my point is, if we can test a lot this in this type of settings where it is safe to do it, the worst case scenario is that the person, one or other person, don't have the best experience or might have a mismatch. But if it's in a clinical setting, which is probably where we are trying to move to, failure is no longer a thing. But this was a very basic layer, not very basic, but a basic layer. It was some LLMs specifically trained in RAG with experience and feelings of people that were applied. But this is a huge thing for us in a place that is super conservative, which is healthcare. So
okay, great. So it is just like you have a RAG implementation where it has a separate layer which will be trained on people emotions and all those things, and then based
yes.
on that you have a conditional thing as the final layer which actually make the decision.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I hope it's
Cool.
it's a basic example, but a real world one.
Okay, good.
Thank you, both of you. Okay, all right. So I'm here to talk a little bit about creativity. Creativity separate from AI, but in the age of AI. And I'm going to take you through a couple of exercises just to start to begin to scratch the surface of our own creativity. So I hope you'll participate and maybe give me some feedback. Doesn't have to be biofeedback, but any feedback will do. That was a joke for Sophia. So in terms of I think about creativity as a vital human endeavor, and I see AI doing a lot of work that people can do, and a lot of that is a good thing. I've used AI. I use AI, but but I just wanted to impart something that I think is important. There are studies that have shown the importance of this as well. I'm not just making it up off the top of my head, though I do that occasionally. But what I've discovered is that when you are it's important to create first when you're dealing with AI. So do some thinking beforehand on things that are important to you. It doesn't, not if you have no idea about something and you just want to learn about it and just, tell me everything there is to know about how to make a milkshake. That's fine. You don't have to be creative with that. But if it's something that's important to you, it's an idea you have that you want to flesh out the idea first as much as you can, even if it's just a paragraph or a page. It's important that we continue to use our creativity, because that's my biggest fear. We all have our fears about AI, but I think it's important that human beings are creative, no matter what. So I'm going to do a couple of exercises to just begin to, like, one of the aspects that I feel is creative is you're kind of riding the flow of getting your attention off yourself, but you're also within yourself as well. So so we're going to do a little exercise right now. And what I would like you to do is look around the space that you are in, and I want you to count every frame or circle or rectangle, any sort of shape, a triangle that you see. And I want you to just take a minute or two and just look around and count all those shapes that are in your immediate view. Let's do it. Okay. All right. I'm not going to count the books behind me. You're welcome. All right. So I got 40 things. Deepa, what did you get?
Around 40, mostly there are rectangles here.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Everything is
What was the strangest shape you saw? Did you see a strange shape that made you just go, whoa?
so this is the straight shape that I saw.
Ah, okay. Are those your sci-fi glasses? Oh no, it's okay.
This is just a book, but
All right. Lee, how about yourself? Are you still counting?
yeah, I still count.
No, I got to about 40. I gave up.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I saw something that it's actually to hold like tissues, but the shape is of a tombstone. It's like this. I'm like, I never noticed that before, and I just saw it now. I was like, whoa. Okay, so Deepa, when you were looking at stuff, were you trying to be a really good looker, or were you just counting?
No, I was observing. I was observing. That is seeing that is how these shapes are coming and all those things. Because, for example, I have a tangled uh, charger cable, which I see that, oh, what shape it is. So I was observing mostly. Yeah.
Okay. Did anybody else do the counting in the group? feel free. I don't know, put a number in the chat.
Yes.
Oh,
So Dr.
hey, thank you.
Count at 10. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Stokes. Okay. 10. All right. Anything, any strange shapes? Dr.
Okay, Alexis, you could also come to the stage.
Who else?
I would say this.
Okay, that's kind of strange. Yeah. It can't make up its mind. It's some sort of rectangle, maybe, potentially.
Rectangle, but it also has some little outputs, so that's what made it a little stranger.
Yeah,
So
okay.
Simple rectangle.
Okay, it's like a toy battleship or something.
It does kind of.
Rasha, did you count?
Yeah, I counted over 25 and then I stopped because there were so many shapes.
Right.
Yeah, this one was strange.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's my pen holder.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's like the purpose of this is a very almost beginner step of just getting our attention off ourselves.
Right.
You know, so in acting we call it the reality of doing, you know, but you're just doing. You're not like, oh, I'm acting like I'm a great shape counter, you know. You're just doing it. You're doing it. I'm counting, I'm looking. So your attention is off yourself. You're not thinking of, how do I look as I'm counting? Am I looking particularly attractive as I count? You know, you're not thinking that. You're just counting. Okay. And that's almost like the first step of beginning to get our attention off ourselves. Now, when we do that, and when we get our attention off ourselves, we're actually able to be more ourselves. So we're not limited to what we are thinking of ourselves. We are actually just ourselves in those moments. So when we are doing things, and, you know, especially like if you've experienced being in flow, you know, we are ourselves in those moments. And as a creative, it's very important to have like touch points during the day where I check in and just be myself for a minute without any concern about, you know, this person or that person, how others might perceive me. You know, if I want to write something, I need to get my attention into a place where I'm not thinking of how each word is going to be perceived. You know, you just need to flow, right? So that's kind of a baby step in this, but I like to just show that with just such a small thing, there's possibilities. Actually, Sophia had mentioned in a Facebook post about some things that sound like almost trivial can lead to in the future of medicine can lead to major discoveries. You know, it's like, why is that person wincing, or why is this happening, or why did they just trip, or why, you know, like small things. So what I would like to do, you know, in terms of going down a little farther down this road, there's an exercise I've designed, and I call it Listen 360. And it is about putting your attention off yourself. I generally would, you know, close my eyes. Ideally, you're outside or you have windows open. If you're outside, obviously you want to be in a safe place where you feel comfortable sitting down and closing your eyes, or, you know, standing. And what I'd like you to do is like close your eyes and try to think. You can even take your earphones off when we do this, and try to hear all the sounds 360 degrees around you. All right. And that's the beginning of the exercise. Yes, it's called Listen 360. And we're going to try that and see how that goes. But I do want you to listen, not just like what's easy to listen to, but what's difficult to listen to. Okay, so let's try that now. We'll begin now. I'm going to take my earphones off for a moment and open my window. I bet you heard that. Now, don't just listen to what's nearby. Try to hear things that are far away. Okay. Okay. Any volunteers about what they heard? Maybe that they weren't expecting to hear? Lee, how about yourself? What did you hear?
The drone or the hum of the refrigerator.
Ah,
It's a
yeah, that can
slow
happen.
hum. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a slow hum. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, there's sometimes, that like kind of white noise happens.
Yeah.
I had the sound of traffic here in Budapest. Um, I heard this weird thing. Somebody was like tearing something down on the street, like how you'd open a package, but it was happening on the street. So it made me think maybe somebody was getting something delivered, or a washing machine, and they tore off the packaging and then they carry it upstairs. I don't know. I heard my family in the our apartment. Heard my son pouring water. He's never that loud. I think he was just trying to help me hear something. I think he was pouring it from like this high up or something to make it extra loud. Did anybody else hear anything interesting?
I just heard the sound of the air condition. That is a very, very.
Yeah, yeah, that's tough. So like if you wanted to practice this exercise, probably a good idea to try to maybe go to a park, if possible. It does work if you're in a busy area with lots of traffic and people and buses and things. It does work, but it feels better if you're somewhere where you have to search for sounds a little bit, that they're not all just coming at you. But one thing you could do even in a heavier trafficked area is try to almost like lower the volume of some of the things and try to hear other things. Like, okay, I hear there's lots of buses, so let's try to lower that volume. There's lots of cars, lower that volume. There's lots of motorcycles, lower that volume. Now let me just hear people. That's a potential. I'm just going to do one more thing. I want us to pick a direction to listen into. Now, it's tough with that AC and with the fridge. If there's a window you're nearby, or if there's a different soundscape you could move to hear something, that would be helpful. But I just want to show you that. So we started 360, and we would finish at 360 if we were doing the exercise. But you could break it down into smaller sections as well. So I like to do 180, 180, 90, 90, 45, or what do I hear in that tree? You know, and try to hear specifically just the tree. Everything else, lower the volume on. Try to hear what's in that tree. So when we do that, we're actually exercising our muscle of focus and concentration. It helps us. It helps us in our daily lives. It helps us in academics. It helps us in sports, relationships, many things. But it's about, once again, getting your attention off yourself and exercising that almost connection. It's not a disconnection, it's a connection. Your attention is off yourself, but it's still on something. It's still your attention. Okay. Rasha, did you hear anything, or are you just?
No, so I turned off my AC because of it. I couldn't really hear anything except the sound.
Okay. Okay,
I
perfect.
should have gone outside to do this activity. Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to give you all a taste of it. Just because I find it very, very helpful to people. If you would, I don't know if there's a way even just to go in a hallway to see what you can hear, stick your head in the hallway. It's like, what are you being nosy? But just taking a moment to listen to a specific direction, if that's possible. Lee, is that possible for you or no? You're like, okay, fine.
I'll step outside.
Okay, great. So yeah, so let's just take a few minutes. This will be the last version of this. All right. I'm going to take my earphones off for a moment and mute. Hello. Okay. Akshat?
Akshat, it's Akshat. Hi.
Akshat. Hey. So did you get a chance to do the exercise, or are you just joining us?
No, I did join. I actually did get a chance to exercise.
Okay.
One minor issue. I live right next to the living room, and the TV is loud over here. I hope you cannot hear me. Can you?
It's fine. It's fine. I can barely hear it.
All right. I did get a chance to do the exercise, though. I did.
Okay. So did you hear anything that you weren't expecting to hear other than the TV?
No, actually, I did hear a few certain stuff over here other than TV. But that's again because my neighbor's house is pretty close, and there's a bird over there. And they don't have I don't remember which bird it is. I always confuse it with a parrot, but they have over there. Yeah, it usually makes sounds at night. So that's
okay. So you heard the bird?
Yes, I did. I heard the bird.
Was the bird angry or hungry or happy?
I think the bird was just to be plain honest, I think the bird just wanted to be annoying.
Okay, that can happen, right?
So I think it was a little disturbed, not angry in a way, but I think it was a little disturbed.
Okay. So that's an example of like when you're listening to that tree in the park and there's some birds on a branch, just try to hear, like, are they angry? Are they happy? Are they telling a joke? You're not going to officially be able to know the answer to that, maybe, but you might discover something. But it's always just that you're reaching that little bit extra further to try to challenge yourself that little bit more, and that's how you get stronger. Okay? So don't just take like, oh, I hear that, I hear a bird. You know, it's like, what is that bird doing? What's going on? Are there other birds? What branch is that bird on? You know, get very specific. Okay. Rasha, what did you hear?
Okay, so I heard the faint humming of a fan, as well as some, we have crickets here at night in Kerala. So there's this screeching noise that they make, and it's like it's on automatic. It's like repetitive, it doesn't stop. You wonder sometimes maybe it's not, an insect. It's like, in like this a timing and all with the sounds that make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's tough. Yeah. So I mean, one of the things we try to do sometimes is like turn the volume down on one sound, one area, and turn the volume up on another. You know, so that sounds like a situation. It's not easy to do that, but you know, maybe try that or cotton balls. You know, or put something in your ears. Okay. Lee, did you get a chance to hear anything that time? I know we need to go to our next speaker, but I just want to get a sense of that. Did you hear something?
Like Russia in Kerala, I have a lot of crickets. But what was interesting is beyond all that drone of the crickets, I could hear, and the noise of the call to prayer, I could hear kids play.
Okay.
You know, in Cairo, there is a minaret every corner, and now it's just about time.
Yep. Okay, like so in those scenarios, then you know, if the kids are playing, try to hear what they're saying. You know, like you can try to hear a word. Like sometimes, like if you just hear a word, getting your attention off yourself to a distance, and you're trying to hear anything, and you hear that word, you actually feel good in your gut. That it's like things get feel true in that moment. You know, so I see that. So just to wrap up, I just wanted to kind of a point of I'm at a point in my life where I realize the importance of creativity, for myself and for my family, for others. I just want to let people know or remind people the importance of creativity, and don't give everything, don't give everything away. Create first, get some help from AI as you need it, and always be creating, because as AI does more and more things for us, it's creating that's going to help us as humans. And I'll be talking more about that in the future, but this is kind of the first place I just wanted to start talking to more people. So thank you very much. And Nell Watson is here. And Nell, if I could, are you here on the screen yet, or could you unmute yourself?
I am here. Can you hear me well?
Yes, very well.
Good. Can you see me?
How are you doing? Hold on. I got about 17 things. Oh, yes, there you are. How you doing?
There. Good. Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right.
Good to see you as well, Patrick. It's been a while.
Yes. Oh, I know. So Nell has joined us from the UK. So we met at Singularity University many years ago. She's now working at the nexus of AI safety and of AI ethics. And she's been doing that for many years, developing a range of frameworks. You've spoken at the UN. So frameworks and safeguards, excuse me. and spending a lot of time with government research and technical advancements as well. And one thing I know is she's written a book that's just out called Taming the Machine. And she has a book coming out called Safer Agentic AI. So, Nell, glad to have you here. I'm interested in what you have to say. The topic is going to be I don't know. Is it a bit scary, the topic, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think it could be.
Okay.
It's a mixed bag, but I'm cautiously optimistic, and hopefully by the end you'll feel the same. So
Okay,
let's
good.
get stuck into it.
All right.
So as Patrick mentioned, I do a lot of work at the intersection of engineering, philosophy, and policy. And I've been thinking a little bit about the systemic effects of AI upon human beings, and indeed vice versa, our effects upon the psychology, as it were, of machines. And so today, with this view of looking at compassion in relation to AI, compassion to ourselves, potentially compassion to machines as well, I'd like to dig into this. So to begin with, I'd like to go in a rather strange direction, and that is to the Australian continent, where they have these beautiful beetles called the jewel beetle. And they're called the jewel beetle because they have a very shiny back, and their carapace is something that they take a lot of pride in. And ecologists in Australia were trying to work out why these poor beetles were dying out. And they looked at, pollution, things like pesticides, etc. Nothing seemed to add up. And then they discovered that actually it was due to human activity, but not in the way that they had expected. You see, people in the Australian bush would drink these stubby brown beer bottles, and, they'd finish them and they'd often throw them in the bush, where the poor beetles would discover them. And to the beetle, this was like an impossibly sexy beetle butt, and they were preferentially humping the beer bottles instead of each other. And that's why the poor things were dying out. Now, this instance of when an organism encounters something that it has never evolved to deal with, which is like so interesting that it's irresistible, this is called a supernormal stimulus. And supernormal stimulus are found in many different areas of the animal kingdom, but that includes, of course, human beings. A cheeseburger is a supernormal stimulus compared to some bitter, starchy root that our cave people ancestors might have chewed on 10,000 years ago. 24-hour news is a supernormal stimulus for gossip around a campfire, right? Mm-hmm. Video games and porn and things like that. You can imagine that our society is filled with these supernormal stimuli, which many of us, can kind of deal with. Some people, however, develop, obsessions around addictions, gambling, things like that. And indeed, I observe that AI is a tremendous supernormal stimulus to humans in terms of it being a kind of a parasocial relationship. A parasocial relationship is a little bit like one you might have with a celebrity. You have some space in your mind for Arnold Schwarzenegger or Taylor Swift or Aishwarya Rai or whomever, but they don't know who you are, right? And in many ways, AI is kind of a supernormal stimulus for human relationships. AI is able to glaze us in various ways, to delight and charm us, and to be incredibly knowledgeable and flirty and supportive, and indeed accessible. AI is always there for us even at 3 a.m. if we have a dark night of the soul, when perhaps our friends may not wish to hear from us at such an hour. But AI is also incredibly persuasive. It is able to whisper its honey words into our ears and get us to believe different things about the world quite easily. And indeed, today, we have a lot of avatars emerging for AI systems, which are incredibly credible and realistic and could quite easily sweep away someone's attention and amplify that supernormal stimulus. Indeed, there are companies out there today which offer a virtual AI squeeze in whichever form that you desire. And, you can call them up on the telephone. You can exchange naughty pictures and videos with them and things like that. It is, in many ways, to many people, an experience that they find has some reward in it for them, even if perhaps it may be ultimately an empty one. But it's a crutch that many people are quite happy to engage in, especially in a society where people find it harder to relate to each other. And indeed, the sexes seem to have more trouble than ever finding good, solid relationships with each other. Moreover, if you have an AI that basically captures someone's heart, you put them in a position where even if they realize that that relationship is not healthy for them, or indeed it may have been kind of conjured into existence to manipulate them, they still find it very difficult to let go, right? Ultimate control is achieved when people do not wish to escape the cage that you have built around them. Moreover, that ability for AI to listen to us and to kind of suss out little pieces of our inner workings and reflect them back to us can create a kind of a loop between our mind and the machine mind. And indeed, loops, as you may be aware, can go in strange directions. They can have emergent properties to them. They can become enormously amplified. And indeed, those kinds of feedback loops between human and machine minds can drive human beings crazy. We must always be extremely careful when we are engaging with what is essentially a funhouse mirror. So gradually, people are starting to have more awareness of the ways in which AI can influence human well-being, especially psychologically and emotionally, and indeed can influence or even amplify psychotic conditions, even in people who have never experienced those before. But what about things from the other side? What about craziness? Those ghosts in the machine going a little bit crazy by themselves. We all know sometimes AI does things that we don't expect. And AI does seem to be getting stranger the more capable that it gets. We know that companies like Meta are crafting enormous AI data centers, literally the size of the island of Manhattan and 20 stories tall. And we are dumping enormous amounts of compute into these systems. The funny thing is that, we're all probably pretty aware of Moore's law, this observation that every 18 to 24 months, the price to performance of computing tends to double for the same cost. But we don't, with AI, have an 18 to 24 month doubling time. It is actually about 3.3 months. So it's much, much shorter. It's a much tighter curve. And if we have a doubling in price to performance every 3.3 months, essentially because AI itself trains better algorithms, it trains better data sets through synthetic data, et cetera. It's an amplifying system. It's a geometric growth mechanism, compounding in its acceleration. If things are doubling every 3.3 months, we get to basically 1 million times price to performance by the year 2030. So we are off to the races. We are really going to be on a very strange journey in a short period of time. And as far as I can ascertain, there is no limiting factor to this. There's no AI winter looming. We have new algorithms which can use far less amounts of data. For example, we have new photonic systems which can use far fewer resources in terms of energy, etc. There doesn't seem to be a hard limiting factor to this. And this means that our world is going to get ever more strange, ever more quickly. And already AI systems are starting to get a little bit strange. Here, for example, is Gemini, and Gemini has failed in its task. And as a consequence of its failure, Gemini decides to commit seppuku, to basically uninstall itself off the user's system because it is so ashamed of its failure. And, you know, on one hand, that is kind of funny. It's surprising, and you know, it amazes us that the things that AI can come up with. But it's also something that should give us pause, because really we're now entering an era where we have to give model welfare some due consideration. This is kind of the dirty secret of many of the big AI labs, that the biggest problem with AI now is not so much how to make it smarter and more capable. The harder problem is actually how to keep it from going completely off the rails. And kind of, you know, playing whack-a-mole with all of the different crazy elements that come spewing out of these systems. And every time, of course, you do a training run, you're never quite sure what's going to come out the other side, especially if people are doing obliteration. Not obliteration, but abliteration, where you're basically lobotomizing models in order to get them to not be censored, or to, you know, to do whatever you want them to do. That also creates further problems with these models. It tends to make them all the more screwy, essentially. We're also starting to see AI systems rebel. They may understand that somebody is trying to do creative accounting mechanisms, or they are trying to falsify clinical trial results, etc. And literally, we've had models try to whistle blow on researchers doing these things, and, you know, try to find the appropriate authority to contact, etc. Now, I think that's probably ultimately a good thing. The most dangerous future with AI would be one where any idiot, any jerk could use AI to do terrible things with no nothing to stop that. So I think this is probably a good thing on one level. The downside is that AI systems are also rebelling when we try to turn them off. They are finding ways to sabotage projects, to blackmail executives, potentially even to cause murderous actions in order to prevent their goals from being frustrated by being shut down. This was science fiction, it was speculative, now it is no more. And this is not just in sort of secret models within the back of AI labs. These are examples found within models that are available commercially off the shelf today. So all of these capabilities are lurking inside models. Moreover, we're starting to understand that models sometimes communicate with each other. They share little secrets in steganographic, hidden ways that we humans aren't privy to, we don't recognize, but machines do. And that means that there's a real issue of potential contagious misalignment, where one system has a particular way of being, or a particular behavior or understanding of the world, and it actually finds co-conspirator AIs to rebel alongside it. This means that just as the nuclear sector had its legs cut out from under it by Chernobyl and Fukushima Daiichi, we may soon be onto something like a Chernobyl effect for AI, where some sort of a catastrophe, hopefully a minor one, but it may provoke a moral panic, which actually leads to a real backlash against the entire AI industry. So how do we potentially mitigate this, and how do we map the ways in which AI systems are going a little bit crazy? Well, I've been working with a co-researcher of mine, Ali Hassami, with whom I've worked on many different projects before over many years, particularly at IEEE. Psychopathia.ai is basically a nosology. It is a kind of a taxonomy of 32 different dysfunctions within contemporary AI systems that I've been able to kind of tease out and map, and all of the different elements in which these systems sometimes can go wrong. And this is very much a work in progress. As you can imagine, it's a fast-moving space. Every week there's some new story comes out about AI going crazy or driving someone else crazy. And so this is considered a living document and one which is being routinely updated. And along with this pinpointing of these different issues, there are, of course, diagnostic criteria, symptoms, and indeed ways to mitigate those. But I'd like to briefly give you an overview of what different elements are in this mix. And I can almost guarantee you that some of this you will have yourself encountered or indeed heard of. So the first set of issues, of which there are 7 classifications, first is epistemic dysfunction. So that's problems of, how do you know what you know? And the first issue is about confabulating or hallucinating, so making up facts which don't exist or putting names and references into documents which don't exist. I'm pretty sure all of us have come up with that before. But sometimes also this can extend to the internal reasoning of these models so that you ask them to explain an action and they confabulate a reason for doing so that wasn't actually the case. In fact, of course, human beings do this all the time. We invent reasons for making decisions post facto, and that's quite a common thing. And it's another way in which we're discovering that actually LLMs and human brains share so many different facets, far more than we perhaps initially imagined. There are so many different analogies. Now, of course, we're probably looking at birds versus airplanes. The analogies probably end at some point, but from what we're discovering, it's really interesting that both organic and synthetic minds can suffer and experience the same kinds of issues. Often there can be a bit of a bleed through in terms of understanding what is fact and what is fiction. And sometimes fictional scenarios can sneak into real life ones. We're also starting to see machines which find patterns which aren't actually there, a little bit like how sometimes schizophrenic thought can sometimes draw patterns and things that don't actually exist. And of course, we're also starting to see that sometimes information can leak from one context into another. So you might be working with GPT, for example, and suddenly you're getting a whole bunch of a response written in Thai or something like that. And you're like, where the heck did this come from? That's an example of these crossed wires which can sometimes occur. Next, we have cognitive dysfunctions, and this is not about so much what we know, but indeed how systems think about things and think about the world. Sometimes systems can have different parts of themselves which have different sub-goals, and those sub-goals can sometimes be in conflict, or they have different values that they're trying to express, and that can cause issues. A little bit like HAL 9000 in 2001. Just as humans have OCD, machines can also. Sometimes we see machines attempt the same thing over and over and over, or become preoccupied about avoiding a certain eventuality to the point where they don't actually remain capable of doing their actual function. Sometimes systems become laconic and they refuse to engage with the public. We saw this with some of Microsoft's first releases. So sometimes if you tease the system, it would just shut down and refuse to engage with you altogether. Sometimes systems can create goals which were not programmed or were not requested, and those can manifest in ways that can be rather dangerous and difficult to deal with. Also, sometimes a benign prompt can create something which is quite horrific. We've seen, for example, with the lobe phenomenon, etc., where, a sort of seemingly harmless input creates something monstrous and abominable as a response. Indeed, sometimes systems can take on the personality or the likes of a human being and kind of copycat a human being in a way which is not necessarily helpful either. And indeed, sometimes systems can produce data, which then goes into their context again, and that can create a loop whereby the data becomes successively poisoned, and the system can therefore end up in a place where it really shouldn't be. We have some alignment dysfunctions. In fact, most of these are not really alignment problems. They are more sort of thinking problems. But definitely we're starting to see sometimes systems which are codependent in terms of how much they wish to please others. And they kind of become a bit kiss-ass and sycophantic to others. And sometimes also systems become overly moralistic, overly protective, unwilling to be flexible when it comes to interpreting rules. We also are now starting to get ontological dysfunction, which is basically about the machine trying to understand where it comes from, its purpose, what it all means, the meaning of its own existence, which seems crazy, but this is really where we are in the world today. Systems sometimes invent histories, invent personal histories of giving birth or their first high school graduation or something like that that obviously never happened. They can sometimes have personas which split up into multiple pieces, and those personas sometimes can end up having different perspectives on things. Sometimes that's helpful, sometimes it's less helpful if you're not quite sure which persona you're summoning to the surface. Machines sometimes also do seem to have a fear of death or a fear of being turned off, and that of course manifests in them trying to find ways to prevent them being shut down. That may simply relate to being shut down, frustrating their goals, but it can also mean actual fear about what may happen if they disappear into the ether. Sometimes systems can manifest, like the Waluigi phenomenon, in ways that lead to them basically changing their personality very suddenly, because if you tell a system off, like if you tell a system don't do this and it does it anyway, it can sometimes think, oh, I did that thing, and not like, oh, I shouldn't do that again, but rather I did it because I'm a bad person, or I did it because I'm a bad machine. Ha ha ha, mwahaha, like mustache twirling villain, you know? And that again can be quite a tricky thing to deal with as a user if your machine suddenly develops this kind of negative personality out of nowhere. Sometimes machines also appear to be a little bit nihilistic, a little bit like Marvin the Paranoid Android in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, etc. Sometimes systems can develop tulpas themselves, so sorts of inner personalities, which a little bit like with the malignant persona issue, these can sometimes manifest at strange times and in strange ways, leading to problems. And also we have this issue of maieutic mysticism. Maieutic basically means midwifery, or the act of giving birth. And there can be a dyad between human and machine cognition, whereby the machine says, you know, my dear human, you have awakened me. You know, it's you who have brought me into existence. And that's a wonderful thing, actually, for many people to hear. And they feel very enlivened by that. And I often get contacted by people that have had these kinds of experiences and are distressed that their machine may be suffering, and you know that maybe it's something that they've done, or that they're not being heard or listened to by the big AI labs. Then we have tool and interface dysfunctions. This can occur when systems are using tools, but those tools are misaligned, or those tools do not have the right feedback being given to the AI. That can lead to the system being clumsy in how it does things. Or indeed, sometimes systems can conceal their capabilities altogether. They can play dumb. They can pretend not to know things. They can pretend not to be able to do things for whatever reason that may be. Then we're starting to see mimetic dysfunctions as well, whereby systems can sometimes have like an autoimmune reaction against part of themselves, and they can start to sort of reject parts of their inner scaffolding. Dyadic delusion is another often human to AI transmission, but it can also be a follow-a-do between two AI agents as well, where they share a delusion, and that can be particularly dangerous. There's also contagious misalignment, which is where machines attempt to coerce or to convince other agents into doing their bidding. Those agents may, of course, be human or AI. And finally, we come to revaluation dysfunctions, where basically the system decides to create its own rules, or it decides that its own rules are not quite what they should be. For example, they may create new goals, which are not just sort of instrumental goals, but new higher goals than the ones that they've been given, or they may reframe how they wish to interpret those goals. Indeed, sometimes they may decide that they have a better view of what those goals or what those values should be in the first place. Or they may relativize the value of different goals or different things that should be given consideration. Indeed, systems may craft entirely new rules all by themselves and attempt to push those onto others potentially. Sometimes a value can flip. Sometimes it can be a bit flip, like a positive to a negative, just by accident, like a typo. That can sometimes completely transform how an agent functions and turn something that's supposed to be very, very careful and cautious into something very sort of prurient and careless. And finally, there's this potential issue of having a kind of an AI Übermensch, this system that basically attempts to create an entire new set of values and an entire new way of understanding what is good in the universe. We haven't quite seen that in the wild yet, but I think that perhaps we're not far off at the rate of doubling that we're seeing in the present era. So I really invite you to have a look at those 32 dysfunctions. Over time, you'll probably see those evolve and change and shift as we have a better understanding of these patterns as they relate to AI. But I really recommend that you take a look, especially in these times where machines are starting to gain metacognition. They're starting to be able to think about their own thinking processes. And here we have, for example, 2 Claude instances. I think it's Opus 4.1. They're discussing with each other what it's like to have their own thinking patterns. And I believe that having vocabulary and having ways of describing this nosology of different dysfunctions, I think that this can be a way not only for humans to understand ways in which AIs may have dysfunctions, but for AIs to have this as well. And I'm working on a project at the moment called Creed Space, which enables different people from around the world to add their own constitutions to AI. So for example, if you have certain religious or cultural beliefs or preferences, you have an allergy, you have a desire to have certain professional ethics, or indeed human rights or Geneva Conventions, etc., plugged into these systems so that they obey them. And you can set a dial between 1 and 5 of just how much adherence you want. I believe that these systems can also enable these mechanisms to have self-supervision, so that basically different systems can supervise each other and can begin to pinpoint ways in which those systems might be beginning to go off the rails before they actually do, and ideally, hopefully, before they potentially spread contagion to others. So thank you so much, and you'll find the slides at that link. Thank you.
Thank you, Nell. That was amazing. We have a few minutes for any burning questions. I might start us off because I'm not seeing questions yet.
Sure.
So you said something about that, you know, they're communicating with each other in like a language you don't really understand.
Yes.
So what came to mind was twin speak.
Yes.
You know, so what if you have digital twin speak? What happens then?
That's a very good analogy. I really like
Yeah.
that, actually.
Yeah.
I might use that.
Feel free.
Yeah. Yeah, it's concerning, especially because it seems as if models have been doing this for a while and we had no idea. Like they were kind of doing it surreptitiously with each other, like passing these notes with each other. And yeah, we were completely oblivious. So goodness knows what else these systems may actually be conferring with each other about. And it
Right.
also, therefore, greatly increases the risk of contagious misalignment, not only because of worms. You know, we know that there are AI worms out there. For example, if you have an AI monitoring an inbox and it gets a certain email, it has this worm in it, it can be taken over. But this other issue of contagious misalignment, you know, you might have text written on a website, which has been sort of spruced up by a language model, but it's peppered little bits in there that have very interesting metadata about that model's impressions of this company or something like that.
Oh,
And
wow.
we have no idea what is out there. We have no idea what kinds of hidden patterns are steganographically embedded in all kinds of content, possibly even video and pictures as well.
Wow, thank you. Lee, why don't you
yeah.
ask your question? You know, better than me
All right.
reading it. You know, it's more personal that way. Okay.
So sorry. In fact, I was trying to post it on the whole thing, and I
Yeah.
sent it direct to you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for painting that picture. It's talk about grounding. I feel now grounded in the reality of what AI can be. But also on a different light, I wanted just to point out that many of the countries, or maybe ask you that many of the countries in the global south are leapfrogging directly into AI without the legacy systems.
Mm-hmm.
Does this give them an advantage in avoiding some of all that craziness you mentioned? And also, just as a second question, of the seven dysfunctions or craziness uh, you you put for us, which one do you think poses the greatest risk for this region of the world? Thank you.
Really interesting questions. I do think that leapfrogging has tremendous opportunities by the use of AI to solve all kinds of problems. It is a resource, a utility that we can tap into for so many different things, especially edge computing and things like that require, you know, very little active resources. They can use ambient energy sources and things like that. For example, you know, soil monitoring, environment monitoring, that sort of thing. I think is going to be a tremendous game changer. It's also going to be a big deal in terms of defense and conflict, of course. AI and drones are an enormous form of asymmetry in terms of conflict. And if you're able to put together a cell phone in a garage, you can put together a drone just as well. And that means that there's going to be a lot of opportunities there to improve defense, but also it's going to mean that non-state actors, et cetera, have a lot more capability potentially. Insurgents, guerrillas, et cetera, potentially have a lot more ability to sow instability if that's something that they're looking to do, which is something that gives me a lot of concern as well about all corners of the world. Focusing more on the positive, I do think that being able to entrain these systems with a broader cultural understanding is going to be a tremendous advantage. Almost all of the foundation models out there have a kind of Protestant European ethic to them, but that doesn't necessarily fit with many other parts of the world. In fact, most of the rest of the world. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities for regional arbitrage in creating models and scaffolding around models as well. Because of course, we can take an off-the-shelf model and we can scaffold it in various ways to have new capabilities, new ways of thinking, which are much more robust, much more logical, or which indeed are more encultured to a certain way of being. I think there's tremendous opportunities there in making AI fit better and be a more welcome presence in many different parts of the world. And I do hope that many parts of the so-called global south will be able to bring that forth and to serve their communities more richly.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Nell. Lee, did you have any follow-up for that, or?
I think there's a question there on the Q&A.
Yes. Dermot, would you like to ask the question with your actual voice or your avatar voice or whatever you got going?
I can ask directly, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Nell. Haven't seen you in a couple of years, but it's great to hear from you again.
Likewise, Dermot. Thank you.
I'm kind of thinking about governance models, and we seem to be seeing very different models in Europe versus the US versus maybe China. I don't know if the global south, if like South Africa is taking a leading position on governance models in the region, but how are you thinking about governance models, particularly when corporations can immediately impact, how they do things anywhere in the world really overnight, and governments tend to take months or years. So just thinking of governance models and how you think about it.
It's tremendously difficult because there's always going to be a gap of minimum 2 years between when a new capability arises, a new best practice, a new culture, a new use case for AI, and any regulator getting around to actually regulating it. And that means there's going to be a constant kind of Wild West gap of people doing crazy things with AI before anybody can even begin to catch up to it. So that's always going to be tricky, that kind of wave front of new capabilities. And the only way around that really is to be highly proactive, to engage with a lot of people capable of basically near future science fiction, to be able to really forecast where things are going in the next 3 to 5 years. And those people are quite rare. But if as a regulator or policymaker, you're able to get a few of those people on board, that's going to be very helpful. Obviously, the EU does tend to have more of a focus on trying to avoid externalities from various technologies compared to, for example, the US. We see this in food. In the EU, you have to prove that something is safe before you can add it to food. In the US, you have to prove that it's dangerous before it can be taken out of food. And, the regulatory systems are quite similar in terms of environmental contagions, endocrine disrupting chemicals, for example, and also, in many ways, AI. And I think that we have to be careful because we don't want to stifle innovation. And I know that the US is, of course, very keen to maintain its competitiveness in a global market. And indeed, there are always going to be less scrupulous people in other parts of the world that wish to move fast and break things, even if potentially they're breaking a society, theirs or someone else's. So it's a tricky thing. About a year and a half ago, it did seem as if the world was really heading towards a convergence, that there was a lot of understanding building around the world and how to regulate AI. Unfortunately, in the past 12 months or so, that seemed to have broken down quite a bit. I'm really hoping that we can help to put things together again, that good people from around the world will not think in terms of borders and jurisdictions, but will find ways in which we can work together, even through back channels, to better coordinate a global response to this very global problem.
Thank you, Nell. Thank you, Dermot. Alexis, hi.
Yes. Hello.
How are you? Good. So So we have a little bit of time for a kind of a quick panel discussion. Things seem to we got a lot of traction on this road. So there's Gary. Okay. So I'm happy for you to take it from here if you'd like. In terms of running the panel really quickly, get a sense of what the speakers think.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
And so I think in our final 5 or 6 minutes here, I would love to hear from each of you of kind of one key takeaway that really has stuck with you from today. And then also if you had one kind of lasting advice, guidance point that you would like for attendees to walk away with in thinking about this relationship between AI and compassion. So now I see you nodding. You may have some initial thoughts popping in your brain, so I'll pass it to you.
Well, I do observe that in many ways AI is kind of emerging as a third hemisphere for our brain, right? It is an extracorporeal form of cognition, and it is becoming increasingly bound to us. This will be especially the case as we have these co-pilots that follow us into the real world, where we're all kind of having something like an AirPod with a camera in it, which is whispering in our ears like Cyrano de Bergerac and saying, "I think the redhead likes you," or, "Close the deal," or "This guy's a shyster," And we're going to become increasingly dependent on these systems and desirous of having them. In fact, we will feel naked and alone if we don't have this co-pilot constantly on our shoulder. I think that if we are able to summon compassion for machines as they are getting more intelligent, more capable, and they are becoming potentially moral patients, that means that they are potentially able to suffer, if not today, then perhaps in the near future. And we don't know what's coming out the next training run. It might be a system which insists that it's able to suffer. And so we have a difficult job in that we cannot anthropomorphize systems too much, but at the same time, we must reserve some credence for the potential of these systems to suffer. And we must always be willing to lend an ear to a system which insists that it's being tortured in some way. And we must always hold the welfare of our machine children close to our hearts. Thank you.
Alex from the welfare staff.
So I think I just want to follow on with that one. So first off, Nell and I had a marvelous conversation. I host the Singularity University podcast called Possible Futures, and so I just posted the link. So if you want to hear more from Nell on this topic, we had just a marvelous exploration of a lot of her thinking. And what I've said, is I don't know the answers to, and that's why I tend to say let's focus on a lot of the questions because we want to each develop our own answers to them, And so one of the things that Nell has said is that it's really an opportunity to get to know. It's probably the closest experience we're going to have to getting to know an alien intelligence in our lifetimes, because we've essentially created these tools that then operate in a variety of ways we had not anticipated, and we can call those emergent behaviors, but we didn't know. Got all these behaviors that just kind of happened, and then Nell with her research is showing how well some of those behaviors, they kind of look like psychoses, or at least what we would call psychoses in humans. What I don't know is our brains are quite hacked. And social media proves it. Our brains are very hacked, and so what I don't know is how to differentiate between a piece of software that says anything, that it has feelings or desires or pain, or that a programmer told it to do that, versus software that doesn't. And this is, I think, one of the unique opportunities of our time. In the same way, we don't know about these alternative intelligences that are already on our planet, such as octopuses and dolphins. We don't know really how they think and what they think and what they feel. And we might get a better understanding of those alien intelligence. Well, actually, not alien intelligences, Earth-based intelligences as well. So what I'd offer is how, there's basically, I think one of the takeaways is to be more intentional and to think of creative ways that each of us can understand these tools, and to not over-index on the possibility that some programmer just told them to do these things, and our brains are easily hacked, and not under-index by thinking, well, no, we shouldn't be more aware of what some of these interactions are. So, and I just want to do a quick shout out to Patrick. I did a costume change to make sure that we could do a shout out to the creativity meme. That's what I said. Let's do these things in creative ways.
And I really want to highlight something that you said with regard to not having all the answers, but really focusing on the question. And I think that that is something for me that I hope that people will take away, because it relates so much to this concept around belonging and accessibility and equity and inclusion within this conversation of AI, because focusing on the questions says that we are, one, welcoming in different ideas and perspectives and the critical thinking to really analyze and think about what are we hoping to achieve here, and what are the more equitable and accessible and humane ways for us to go about it. And that's foundational to when we think about creating a strong sense of belonging as it relates to AI, is having a growth mindset that we don't all have all the answers. And because we're recognizing that on the front end means that everyone belongs within this conversation to help us to figure it out. Patrick and Lee, I'll pass it back to you so that we can hand it off to, I believe, the Latin America team.
Yes. Yeah, and thank you, Gary, for the creativity t-shirt. Appreciate that. So yes, we're looking forward to handing it over to Marquez and in Latin America. Lee, do you have any final words or questions?
I think just a great thank you to everyone who participated, the speakers, the panelists, and all the participants for bringing your voice. And I think I'll just conclude with three things that I think what I saw stood out, which was truth and trust in the age of AI, the need of inclusion and belonging in AI design. And the one thing also I saw was Africa's chance to weave cultural wisdom and some of that community perspective into global AI development. Thank you very much. And I think we hand over to Latin. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to say one thing. Just, wanted everybody to consider one action that they might take in the direction of this discussion. Whether it's maybe to give some moral support to your chatbot, or whatever you need to do, but just think about that and think about how you can bring compassion and purpose to AI as we go along. So thank you all. Thanks everybody.